Good morning. This is very tight.
Yes.
Good to have you all. And welcome back to another week of government in crisis because of the inability of the Republican Party to govern, either here in the House of Representatives, the Senate, or for the nation. We have a missed budget deadline of April 1st. It's now June 11th. Am I right? Let me check. 13th. My gosh, I'm losing my days. They're blurred. That deadline has been blown past, behind on budget appropriations. In fact, they're only starting the first budget bill today, which is setting up for chaos once again this fall as we head towards the end of the fiscal year. We have the Republicans are ignoring the debt ceiling issue that is looming every day over the United States. These are obligated debts that we owe. The full faith and credit of the United States is on the line, yet our Republican colleagues continue to ignore it. We have a health care bill in the Senate. Apparently, it's being done shockingly in secrecy. No one knows what's in the bill. I'm told even if a bill is filed, that bill will be substituted by a bill that no one knows or knows anything about or has seen. There have been no hearings in the Senate. And I know many of my Democrat, I would assume even some of our Republican colleagues may be disturbed by the fact that there are no hearings taking place in the Senate on a bill that 56%, there's 56% disapproval of the House effort so far. Senate GOP is following the same path of the Republican colleagues in the House of Representatives. So it's more of the same old that we've been seeing over the past couple of years here in the House of Representatives. It's only exacerbated by the fact that they control every lever of government today, the presidency, both houses of the Congress, and yet are still unable to get any major piece of legislation passed, or even the most basic of things done, like passing a budget and passing the appropriations bills to keep government simply operating. This is a very inept Congress, controlled by Republicans. The Republicans control everything, and they still can't seem to get anything done. On a brighter note from our Democratic Caucus, I want to announce, along with the Vice Chair, the creation of a task force, the National Security Task Force within the House. I want to thank Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, Stephanie Murphy of Florida, and Jim Panetta of California in helping to co-chair that effort. It's important for our caucus to discuss these issues in a much more detailed way, to communicate solutions and counterpoints to the issues before the American people. It's an issue that we care tremendously about. We have experts on the committees of jurisdiction and working with our ranking members as well as those members of the committee, but really bringing the entire force of the caucus on this issue to focus on this. And I just want to thank those members for taking on this task and this responsibility. So with that, let me turn it over to my good friend and colleague, the Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus, Linda Sanchez.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Well, the theme of the week is, where's the budget? The Republican-controlled government is not working well for the American people because you can see that they can't do basic things, something as basic as passing a budget. They failed to pass their budget by the April 15th deadline, which puts the appropriations process behind schedule in its work. And for the rest of the year, we will be trying to play catch-up. If no action is taken soon, we'll be relegated to passing another stopgap funding bill, or even worse, facing yet another Republican-caused government shutdown. The Republican Congress continues to drive the country towards disaster, and if they don't get their act together soon, we're going to be in really big trouble. It seems that the Republicans can't even agree amongst themselves about raising the debt ceiling. Once again, through their inaction, they are risking the full faith and credit of the United States. And we've said over and over again that a failure to meet our obligations would be catastrophic for our economy and essentially hit working families the hardest. Now, Democrats are ready to work with Republicans on responsible spending legislation and to prevent a catastrophic default, but we will not negotiate with the lives of American families. If they want a debt ceiling increase to programs in order to cut programs that keep families out of poverty and feed children, then they're going to have to find those votes on their own. we will not help them make life harder for those families that are struggling in this country. And that includes, by the way, taking away health care for 23 million Americans. As Joe mentioned, the Senate is now drafting their health care proposal behind closed doors. And if they were proud of it, why wouldn't they be doing it out in the open? Why wouldn't they be holding hearings to hear from witnesses about the best ways to craft a piece of legislation? Even many GOP senators are upset that they are being shut out of the process because there are 2 or 3 people working behind closed doors, drafting a piece of legislation that no one can see, no one can read, and no one has input into. I think we should be very worried about what they might come up with. Democrats have made healthcare a priority, and we've made our priorities in healthcare crystal clear. We want lower premiums, we want to expand coverage, and we want to improve care. We have said all along that we stand ready to fix those things that need to be fixed and improved in the ACA. But what House Republicans showed the country is that their repeal and replace is just a mirage in the desert. There's no there. They don't really have a plan for what to replace the ACA with. And they can't, frankly, deliver on their health care promises. You know, it's time to get serious and confront the challenges that our country expects us as members of Congress to confront. We need to roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty, and really deliver for the American people. We are ready, again, to improve what exists and what is working well and fixing that which is not. Pity that we don't see the same level of commitment from our Republican colleagues who can't seem to get their act together. And with that, I will call Joe back up.
So many have talked about the brilliance of Mitch McConnell. Look at the shiny object over here, what the president's doing on Russia. Don't look over here what we're doing on health care. I think the American people need that to be brought to their attention, that what they're doing is even more obscene than what was done in the House of Representatives, where there were no hearings, there was no CBO score before the bill came to the floor. I doubt very seriously there was a CBO score brought before they have a vote in the Senate. If there is a vote in the Senate, we hope there is not a vote in the Senate, but if there is, there probably won't be a CBO score. There certainly won't be any hearings, and it really makes what happened in the House look like child's play in terms of lack of transparency. So we do hope that our Republican colleagues in the Senate get back to working in a more bipartisan way, which they're known for, and work with Democrats to actually help the American people work through these issues, these difficult issues on health care, and get a bill that will meet the needs of the American people. And with that, we'll happily ask her any questions we can. Yes.
On workforce development, given the White House's push on this, do you see any opportunities to work with them on this front? And do you see a potential platform for Terry Sewell's workforce development proposal here, or a way to advance that?
Well, we hope that there is an opportunity to work on that issue this week. This is the week. Last week was Infrastructure Week. We know that there was very little discussion or very little movement on anything in reference to infrastructure by the White House. Maybe this week on job force development there'll be a new day, and maybe we'll have some real discussion on policy moving forward and getting to things like Terry Sewell's proposal. That remains to be seen. But the reality is that these issues, they simply don't. You can't just do everything in a week. Focusing on it for a week is important. But we saw last week the focus was on infrastructure. There was very little, if any, focus on a critical issue to the American people, and that is reinvesting in our nation's infrastructure. So, based on past performance, it's hard for me to, yet grade as to whether or not we'll be more successful in job development than we were in infrastructure. I don't know, Linda, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just add really briefly, we are very interested in the issue of workforce development, as is evidenced by Terry Sewell's work on the issue, and infrastructure. We recognize the need to invest in America's infrastructure and to grow the economy, to help move goods and services efficiently so that our economy can grow and everybody can share in that growth. But what I find from the Trump administration is they make these huge pronouncements about what they're going to do, and then nothing gets done. I mean, despite his cabinet meeting where he thinks he's accomplished more than any other president other than Roosevelt, look at legislatively what has been accomplished. All of the major issues that he swore and promised during the campaign trail that, we're going to get done have yet to get done. So it's hard to imagine that, jumping on this next issue of infrastructure and workforce development, that somehow that's going to magically, reappear and succeed when all these other projects are languishing. It doesn't speak well to their track record. And I would just add that so long as they continue to push Democrats aside and not work in a bipartisan manner, they're going to have a hard time getting this stuff done. I mean, they haven't figured that out yet through healthcare and their so-called tax reform. Eventually they may wake up and smell the coffee and realize that, America needs both Democrats and Republicans working together to get stuff done, and they will stop excluding us and pushing us out of the process.
Yes.
Could I ask each of you about Congressman Sherman's articles of impeachment, your views on it and what its prospects might be in the caucus and in the House?
Well, in terms of the prospects, I think you'd have to ask Mr. Sherman that. What I think is happening is there is a special prosecutor in place. That's something that the Democratic Caucus had called for, and we're grateful to see that was accomplished. We also continue to call for the creation of an independent commission to look into all these issues in terms of Russia and whether or not there was collusion, whether or not there was, in terms of Mr. Flynn's involvement or other members of the president's cabinet, both post or present, or going back to the campaign. But that's what we've been asking for and calling for. We will continue to call for that. But I think in terms of the specific legislation, every member has the ability to draft and to drop in the hopper any issue they want. I think for many of us, and speaking for myself, I think we need to let the facts lead where they will. And that's why we have a special prosecutor in place and let him do his work.
Yeah, I would just say that the sentiment among the leadership and my sense among the majority of the caucus, that's that they want to see the special prosecutor go through the investigation and see where the facts lead. In any trial, I am an attorney, you have to have the facts before you can put the case together. And so I think a majority of the caucus is waiting to see where the facts lead before making a judgment. And again, as Joe said, any member can introduce any piece of legislation that they want. We are a big tent party, but again, I believe that I speak on behalf of the leadership and probably the majority of the caucus when I say that people are waiting to see where the investigation leads.
Yes,
Building on that a little bit, I know there was some heated discussion today with Capuano and I don't know, maybe others who said you should have talked to the caucus about this before doing this Lone Ranger push to Sherman. I mean, do you think that should have been a caucus-wide discussion before he started drafting these articles of impeachment and moving them around yesterday?
My recollection, and again, what happens to the caucus typically stays at the caucus, but my recollection is there was no direct conversation or indirect conversation between Mr. Capuano or any other member. I think Mr. Capuano was speaking, generally speaking, on issues of this magnitude that we need to have a conversation within the caucus before something like that moves forward. I think that's legitimate. Whether it's on this or any issue, whether it's on this or on emoluments or on the veterans bill that's before us today, where there are issues of concern to the Democratic caucus. So I don't think that's unusual, quite frankly. Look, I look at this and what the president has been involved in, and I can come to my own conclusion in terms of his firing of Mr. Comey and what the cause was when he said it himself, was to end the so-called Russian investigation, as he alludes to it. Look, what happened yesterday in terms of the president's cabinet meeting was just bizarre. It's bizarre world. He talked about that Roosevelt had to deal with depression, not the depression, but depression apparently. He's dealing with psychosis within his own cabinet at the moment apparently. But I think the American people are also more and more coming to their own determination of this. What they want us to do here in Washington is to focus on the issues that matter to them. It is about job creation. It is about health care. It is about getting a budget passed. It is about the debt ceiling. It's about all the other things that Washington should be working on. Let the issue of the special prosecutor move forward. He will do his work, assuming he's not fired. He will do his work. If other things happen, we'll be happy to address them at that point. But the consensus of the caucus, as I see it, is let the special prosecutor do his work. Yes.
Mr. Crowley, we're stepping back just a little bit. Do you think the media's coverage of the controversies in the Trump administration is more severe than that surrounding the Obama administration, or even the Clinton cabinet, the Clinton when she was Secretary of State? Are we having a double standard of some kind?
Oh, I don't think there's any double standard. I think you were very severe on Hillary Clinton and following all the investigations that took place here in Washington, and rightly so in terms of transparency. These are issues of magnitude to the American people. I think that the nation is in crisis right now. I think the issue of Russia is an incredibly important issue. But right now we have our committees that are the chairs and ranking members of the requisite committees investigating the issue. They're doing their job. We have a special prosecutor who's been appointed. He's doing his job. We would like to see that further enhanced by the creation of a permanent independent commission to delve even a deep dive in terms of building back confidence by the American people in its government, understand what the Russians attempted to do, what they accomplished, what they failed to do, what they want to do again, and how can we prevent it. That's what I think the independent commission can accomplish for the American people, because we're all in this. Our democracy was attacked. Our democracy, many believe, is under threat. And so for all of those reasons and those issues, I think we need to let people do their jobs.
And Ms. Sanchez, do you think we have any double standard in how we're covering the controversies?
I don't. I mean, the traditional role of press is that of providing information and transparency and getting to the bottom of what is going on. When you step into the public arena and you run for public office, you know that going in, everything that you do and say is going to be subject to the scrutiny of reporters. And if you don't have the stomach for it, you're in the wrong profession. I mean, we are at a very precarious situation right now in terms of electronic media, the 24-hour news cycle, where anybody can allege anything. And if it's repeated enough, people begin to believe it, the so-called era of fake news. And so I think thoughtful and critical reporting is more important than ever in terms of trying to get information out to the American people. And again, I just feel like if you step into a public role, if you have an ego to run for president but don't have the stomach to do the hard slog through all of the difficult parts of it, then you're in the wrong office. You're in the wrong job.
Yes.
Following back on the Sherman measure, have you or other Democratic leaders specifically given him guidance on how to move forward or not move forward on potentially bringing this up as a privileged resolution on the floor?
I haven't spoken to him. Have you spoken to him?
No.
No, we haven't had any conversation with him.
Putting everyone on the record about this in a procedural floor vote, would that be helpful?
Well, I think we might be getting ahead. We don't know what he's going to do at this point, and that's up to Mr. Sherman to determine what he'll do, or what any other member will do with that when it comes to a privileged resolution. So I don't want to speculate or at this point, but what I can say is that clearly in the discussion within the caucus, the call for a further discussion before measures like that are brought to the floor. Again, every member has the right to bring a measure before the floor if he or she chooses to do so, using themselves as guidance, as we hope that they would use the guidance of the caucus as well in determining bringing that forward. I do think the issue of impeachment is a very profound issue, one that strikes at the core of our democracy. And for our ability to balance and counterbalance the powers of the three branches of government, whether it's in the legislative in the use of impeachment, the judicial use of impeachment, as well as the executive use of impeachment. Something that we need to do in a very sacred way, because it is ensconced in our Constitution. It speaks directly as to who we are as a people. Fair play. The rule of law, the evidentiary proceedings, albeit the president is significantly different in many respects in terms of what he can or cannot be indicted for, etc. But that's why we have a special prosecutor to delve into it. Let it lead where it will. If there's no there, there's no there. If there is, that's a different issue. And then I think we would do ourselves a service, and more importantly, would do the American people a service if we allowed for the process to work its way through. Short of that is we're doing a disservice to ourselves, and what the accountability we hold the president to should be no more nor no less than any other American citizen. Any other questions? Well, we thank you all very much and enjoy your week, and we'll see you throughout the week.